Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
A classic rivalry was the centre stage when United hosted Liverpool, and in an upset win, United came out on top, 2-1 thanks to goals by Sancho and Rashford, with Salah scoring the consolation for Liverpool. The XG does have United edging it out on paper, but what tactics did Ten Hag and Klopp use? Let's take a look. We'll begin with Liverpool in possession and United out of it. Initially, Liverpool were building up with a fairly traditional shape, with a back two of Gomez and Van Dijk, whilst Robertson and Alexander-Arnold would start deeper to begin with. And United's press shape was adaptable. Rashford would always be one of the pressers, choosing which centre-back he was going to press. It would then be up to the far side winger to become the second forward, pressing the second centre-back in order to apply that pressure, whilst Fernandes would move on to a pivot. This would leave the far side fullback free. However, United were banking on the pressure from the forward, making this a much more difficult pass to make. Here you see the Liverpool shape in a rough back four, although Alexander-Arnold has moved higher in this instance. And this was the usual scenario for United, with the far side winger coming in to press alongside Rashford, so that both centre-backs could be put under pressure. At the same time, Fernandes would look to tie up the pivot, whilst the ball side winger was much more conscious of cutting out his fullback. This does potentially leave the far side fullback as the free man, but as you can see, this is a difficult pass to make under pressure. So Liverpool did have different solutions for this. With Liverpool being in a 4-3-3 and United in a 4-2-3-1, at times this could be the perfect man-to-man midfield. So one solution that Liverpool had was switching to more of a double pivot, with a man dropping alongside Henderson, so that now there was a 2 versus 1 in this scenario, making it easier to find one of the men from the centre-back. This was made possible by Firmino being willing to drop into the midfield, making it much more difficult for the second United pivot to still move on to the deeper Liverpool man. Alternatively, if Liverpool weren't going directly through the midfield, having deeper fullbacks was a way of developing an outlet option, as it would be easier to find them in these deep regions where they could then look to play forward. But one thing we also did see was Liverpool temporarily switching to more of a back three, with one of the fullbacks, usually Robertson, becoming the deeper of the two fullbacks, allowing Trent higher up, either wide or into the midfield. This would allow Liverpool to have a 3 versus 2 in this situation, making it much easier to play out as there was no more man-to-man pressure. But once Liverpool were behind, they switched to a dedicated back two in the build-up, with both of their wing-backs pushing much higher up the pitch. This did lead to problems as there would be gaping holes in the defence, and time and again we saw United win the ball back with the turnover, and their forwards and wingers were willing to attack the wider regions, and United found a lot of success in this manner, playing into the space and then looking to create opportunities. So here United are behind, and we can see that Van Dijk and Gomez are the dedicated back two, with Trent now starting much higher up, whilst Robertson can also be found higher up the pitch. So eventually, when there is the turnover, Sancho is still high up the pitch, and Eriksen makes the incisive pass looking to feed him behind Robertson. Robertson, who had been high, is still out of position. This allows Sancho to then look to feed in Rashford, which leads to a decent opportunity that is well blocked. And in the build-up to the first goal, we can see that Robertson is positioned higher up the pitch. And then there is a turnover and Sancho is able to drive higher up, in behind Robertson's original position. Van Dijk is then dragged out of position, as he's looking to cover Rashford. But when the ball is played back, Fernandes is able to make that first time pass into Rashford that he can look to run onto. The ball will then be crossed into the box and it eventually leads to Sancho's excellent goal. So with both fullbacks high, Liverpool did have ways of building up with more solidity. This was primarily through Milner dropping deep when Robertson did push higher up, so that this could become a pseudo back three, allowing them more coverage of the pitch, while still allowing Robertson higher up the pitch. At the same time, this would then allow Diaz into more central regions where he could play as a centre forward, as Firmino throughout the match was looking to drop extremely deep. So, with Milner wide, Firmino could then move into the midfield. As a result, Liverpool could still find Robertson higher up the pitch, while still having a man deeper. So here we see a familiar shape, with Milner deeper and to the left, which has then allowed Firmino to drop into the midfield. This also allows Diaz to become the centre forward, as Robertson out on the left is providing the width, and Milner will look to find him. So as you can see, this shape does give Liverpool more horizontal coverage of the pitch. And United did look to adapt to this shape, becoming more passive in defence and less concerned with pressing higher up. So Rashford would often be the sole centre forward, while Sancho and Elanga were defending narrower. While Sancho and Elanga were defending more as traditional wingers. But rather than staying out wide, they would often tuck in, looking to prevent the overload that could be created when Firmino was dropping deep, as Diaz would also be happy to move into the midfield at times, whilst Milner could also look to cause the overload. But higher up the pitch, this right side triangle of Salah, Trent and Elliott caused all the problems. Elliott was perfectly happy drifting over to the right, especially with Firmino dropping into the midfield, taking up his position at times. This would mean that often Liverpool had 3 versus 2 situations out wide. So, if Salah stayed wide, tying up the fullback, and a United winger was on the fullback, Elliott could often find space in these pockets. But what we also saw a lot of was Salah then looking to move in central, which would draw in the fullback, meaning that Elliott could then receive an acres of space in this region and either look to drive forward to then have a shot or look to cross into the box. But for the most part, it was to no avail. So, that was some of what Liverpool looked to do on the ball, and United did have very little of it, but still, let's touch on their tactics in possession. In many ways, being the team expected to play on the back foot suited United, as it hid their frailties in possession. De Gea, rather than being forced to look for risky short passes, was happy to go long from the outset, although again his long distribution was not the best. But still, it reduced the odds of making a fatal error. By going long, it also meant that there was less pressure on a single pivot to do all of the progression as we have seen before in United's first 2 matches, as when the opposition did press the single pivot, the whole attacking play would break down. But when United did have the ball higher up the pitch, as always, Liverpool were looking to press. And their front 3 would all be involved in the press, but more pertinently, a midfielder was always willing to join in. Initially, they would use their cover shadow to prevent a ball into the midfield, and once that pass was cut out, they would then press one of the centre-backs, allowing the second forward to press the other one, so at times it looked like a 4 versus 4 press. Either way, it was effective at getting United to play backwards and then go long, giving away the ball. So here, Liverpool are initially pressing with their front 3, who can all pick up a different man. And Milner and Elliott were so effective in this role at initially covering in the midfield and then looking to spring forward. So you can see Milner's cover shadow prevented the ball into McTominay, so now the ball is forced wide. And at times this is what Liverpool's front pressing shape would look like, so it could be a 4-2-4, allowing them to apply optimal pressure. And as discussed, one way United did deal with this was by playing with the traditional double pivot at times, and Fernandez's presence here would discourage too many midfielders from pressing at once, so if one man was looking to press, one of the double pivots could be found to then move higher up the pitch. But this aggressive pressing shape from Liverpool was not without consequence. Both Diaz and Salah tended to remain high as they were looking to press and be in positions ready to transition. This would naturally mean that both Robertson and Trent could become isolated against their respective winger. In this match, Liverpool's midfield was not the most mobile at looking to cover across, so we did see situations where United were able to isolate a man, usually against Trent, where they could then look to run at him and get crosses into the box, and United did have some success in this manner. And overall, it was a largely positive match for United, showing a lot of energy and being successful in unsettling Liverpool. However, being able to play on the back foot meant that their weaknesses in possession were not examined. Liverpool, on the other hand, will not be concerned with their start to their season, although Klopp will probably turn it around. Tactically speaking, Ten Hag earns a 6.5, exploiting the space behind the fullbacks well, whilst Klopp earns a 5, not getting his side to perform to their usual level. But what did you make of this match? And as always, not every tactic could be covered, so drop anything else you noticed down below.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out.
And a special thanks to my patrons including Robert O'Brien, Ed Salen, Vladimir Yankovic, Barnabas Durr, and Amal Sultan.
But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.